Good evening, race fans, and welcome to another edition of ROSS Racing, of course brought to you by Rockingham Dragway and RockinghamDragway.com. I am Matt Harrelson, of course, alongside with me for the ride, Russell Parker. Now, it was a big day for race fans all around the world on Sunday as three of the largest motorsports raced for a total of 1,200 miles. You can go a long way in 1,200 miles. Starting off in France for the Monaco Grand Prix at 9 a.m. for us here on the East Coast, it was British native Lewis Hamilton taking the victory. Not long after the Formula One race, everybody's attention turned to Speedway, Indiana for the 103rd running of the Indy 500. So, Simon Pagenaud started off on the pole for the race, and then in an intense battle with Alexander Rossi, he got the checkered flag for his first ever Indy 500 win. So, Russell, first question of the day. How did Pagenaud pull off the win like he did?
Well, he's in a very tight, very small club of people who can say that they won Indy 500 from the pole. I think maybe only 5 other drivers have done that in this history. So for him to do that is a huge feat on its own. But what really impressed me the most about going in towards the end of this race was that he stayed up there, and then he had Alexander Rossi come up and was really battling him for the lead. He took it with about 4 to go. And I thought it was over. I didn't think Pagenaud was coming back from it at all. But he kept with the draft. Every single lap, last 3 laps come around. That was about a lap and 3/4 left of the race left, and he took the lead back, and it was just mind blowing at how he did it. It was just so intense between the two. Like I don't know a whole lot about IndyCar, but I know that Indy 500 is really difficult to pass out, and it's just amazing that he was able to pull it off. He used a lot of drafting mechanics like NASCAR does for this race, so it was really cool to see how they did it. And at 200 plus miles per hour, the way they were able to handle those wheels, and it's incredible. I
was about to say, these guys are going at breakneck speeds, over 200 miles per hour. But let me ask you this. Why is it so difficult in Indy, or just in general, to win from the pole?
I guess because, when you get on the pole, you feel like you got you had the best car all around, and that you're really confident, but maybe you might get overconfident. And, it's a long race too, and maybe something mechanical doesn't go right. There's also different setups that drivers take in their cars where it works only good for a quick lap or two, like they do for qualifying, versus the long run. A lot of drivers set up their cars differently for that reason. So it all depends on where you are at the time of the race, but he seemed like he had the best car all around. I mean, good on speed. He stayed within the top 10, top 5 throughout the entire race. Just being very cool, calm, and collected. I just think it was the best thing. And the interesting thing was that he has been struggling with this car. They released kind of like a new generation of the Indy cars. And he was struggling with it a little bit last year. And now he's finally figured it out. I think his best way of doing it is win Indy 500.
Absolutely. And before we move on to NASCAR, I also want to ask you about Sunday's race. It seemed like there were quite a few gaffes on pit road. Did you notice any of those? One guy got hit by a tire. Another one almost got run over.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things happened on pit road for sure. There was one guy who had an uncontrolled tire, and someone hit it, and one official got very lucky. Almost got ticked with that thing up against the wall. But yeah, pit road's pretty crazy, especially considering that their pit road, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think they have they might have a pit road speed, but on entry you can kind of come at it as hard as you want and slow it down as you get into it. I mean, coming down from 200 miles per hour to like 50 miles per hour, that's really hard to do, and it's just really intense on pit road, and I think those crew members have a lot to handle when they get out there on that track.
They do, and 99 times out of 100, they do it seamlessly, which makes people maybe take it for granted a little bit. But very dangerous and wild there on pit road. But moving on, about 3 hours after the conclusion of the Indy 500, the green flag dropped in Charlotte, North Carolina, for the Coca-Cola 600. Now, in NASCAR's longest night of racing, it was a battle of who can endure 400 laps around the mile-and-a-half track. In the end, it was Martin Truex Jr. and your man Joey Logano fighting for the top spot after a wild restart, but the 19 cars spoiled the perfect Team Penske sweep of the day and drove to the winner's circle. So, Russell, we've seen these two go at it in the past, and once again, we found them together in a final part of the race. Is the proverbial war still going on?
Well, I was really disappointed that Logano did not get this win. It was because of the fact that Team Penske won the Indy 500 with the V22 yellow car. I was hoping to see the same thing happen, repeat that same night. At Charlotte, didn't happen. But, Logano and Truex are still battling hard. It's really intense to watch it. Watching it as a fan, I was like, get him. You got to get around Truex. You got to. And it's just like, I don't know. I like the rivalry between them because of what Truex said after Martinsville last year. He said he won the race, but he ain't winning the war. And Logano, I would say he won the war by winning the championship, but Truex has beaten Logano now twice out of 2 for 2 now in terms of close finishes between them this season. Earlier it was at Richmond, now we have Charlotte. So I think Truex is still on as a man on a mission. He's now got 3 wins this season. Hasn't really lost a step from last year. We mentioned a few weeks ago that it took him up to about this point to start winning all the races he did. So he's kind of getting back into the groove of things. And I think that Logano, he's still only 6 points away from the top spot in the point standings. No one else is really closer than that. The third place is like 50 points back. So to say that Logano still has a chance to take the points lead before the end of the season, probably the best chance. The other guy's Kyle Busch. No surprise there. Mm-hmm. So Truex getting the wins, Logano being the most consistent. I think that those two are probably going to be your big battles as we continue along and see how they improve.
Well, you're obviously right about all that. However, it is good for NASCAR to have these sort of rivalries like Logano and Truex, right?
No doubt. Everybody loves a good rivalry. Yeah. Earnhardt, Gordon, which was kind of made up through the fans more than it was through the drivers. There was a really good documentary on that a while back. You got so many different ones out there. Of course, NASCAR was put on the map essentially when this first broadcast of race had a fight at the end of Daytona 500. So that really put it on the map. And rivalries, this has been Sandy Sinclair and Ryan Newman. Of course, the last week they actually met up at the Bass Pro Shops up there in Charlotte. And well, they sat next to each other. Ryan Newman was like, "Come on, buddy, sit over here." He did like a little pat down, and they did. Somebody brought gloves for them to sign, so I thought it was pretty cool for that. So rivalries definitely get help, and Clint Boyer even noted that it was the biggest turnout for autograph signing he's ever seen at a Bass Pro Shop. So obviously it helps out not just the fans of the sport, but also the sponsors that come along with it.
Absolutely. So we've talked about how dominating Ford has been this season, and Toyota's been fast as well. Now Chevy hasn't had the speed, but at Charlotte there were only 3 Mustangs, 2 Camrys, and 5 Camaros. So Russell, have the tables turned?
I think so. I said it before. Around summertime, we're getting closer to summer. June 22nd is about to be here. When that happened, when the summer heats up, so does Hendrick. And Hendrick, all four of those 5 were all Hendrick drivers. The other one being Chris Buescher, which is a guy you never will hear about. So you gotta say that the Chevrolets are doing pretty solid right now, and you expect Hendrick to do well at Charlotte anyways, because it's kind of their track, if you will. Toyota and Ford, I'm not sure what's going on with them. I know Joe Gibbs had some tire issues throughout the day. Hamlin and Kyle Busch, I believe even the 19th car had a little bit of trouble, but he didn't win the race, of course. So, I think Ford may just had an off night. There wasn't really a whole lot going on for them. Of course, Brad Keselowski was one of the fastest Fords and probably could have won the race, but he got caught up in a wreck, so left it up to Logano.
All right, well, we're going to talk about perhaps a newcomer as far as car makers in just a moment. But before we get to that, let's talk about drivers in the groove, and there are quite a few of them. So who was in the groove this week?
So for the Indy 500, I've got Santino Ferrucci. I think he started 23rd and finished 7th. He is a rookie in the IndyCar, so huge top 10 finish for him to start off his first ever Indy 500 race. For the Coke 600, I got Chris Buescher, who I mentioned earlier. He started 22nd, finished 6th. Came off of a late decision there at the end to not pit. I think he may actually have no tires left, no good tires for a pickup, but he managed to hold off with the big guys and get a top 10. And for the Xfinity, I had John Hunter Nemechek, who started 10th and finished 5th.
So just real quick, Ferrucci now has set the bar pretty high for himself. Maybe only one way to go is down, although he still left himself a little bit of improvement to be made. So let's bring back everybody's favorite game show. We haven't done it in a little while, Checkers or Wreckers. And up first on the list, on the final restart of the Coke 600, David Reagan's 38 team was asked by other teams to drop to the back due to not having fresh tires. And David's team basically told them where they could stick it, Checkers or Wreckers.
I'm going to say Checkers on David's part. I don't agree. I get that he had old tires and he had no new ones in the pit, so he couldn't get them. But to ask a driver
Yeah.
to move out of the way so they can have a clean race at the end, no, you don't do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. Why would you even consider the fact that someone who is trying to get their sponsors on screen for as much as they can move to the back where all the attention is not going to be at? So, no, David's team made a right call and stayed up front, and they may have finished just outside of top 10, but they still had a solid run there, and I think it benefited them very well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would blame Reagan for telling them where they can stick it, and it's probably not sunny where he told them. Up next, the Indy 500 pays double points for the IndyCar Series. NASCAR should do the same for their crown jewels that include, of course, Daytona 500, Spring Talladega Race, the Coke 600, the Darlington Southern 500, and Indy Brickyard 400. Checkers or wreckers?
I'm going to say checkers. This is kind of something that popped in my head when the Indy 500 broadcast announcers, which shout out to NBC, they actually had their first IndyCar broadcast ever, and it was actually really good. But I think that when they said that about double points, I'm like, that would be a really good idea for like the Coke 600, Daytona 500, and I was like, okay, what about the rest of the crown jewels? So just put them all together, get double points. It'll make those races even more interesting. Some people may not see the emphasis on those crown jewels at this point because they all do it about the same. Other than Darlington, who has now the throwback every single year now, and Daytona's just Daytona. So I think to give them a little more of an incentive for people to tune in and for people to want to drive harder in these races, I think they would definitely get it. Kind of going back to the old Winston Million where you win all the crown jewels and you get a big payout for it at the end of it. So I think that will give it a lot of more interesting views.
Now, before we move on, quick question. The team of Mike Tirico, Danica Patrick, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. did the Indy 500, correct?
Yes, they did.
So obviously Tirico's there for your play-by-play. Danica makes sense. What do you think of Junior's performance?
I really liked him. He looked at it from a fan perspective, from kind of like an outsider perspective, which I think was a good idea because he's not in the sport as often. He did this earlier in the season with the ISMA Rolex 24 race. He looked at it from an outsider's perspective, and he did the same thing with Kentucky Derby. So he's looking at it from an outsider's perspective, and I really like that because not everybody is always going to be interested, and he knows he's got a fan base who's going to be watching because he's there. And I think him explaining it helps get those sports potential more fans because now they understand what's going on. So I think they did a great job. And of course, Danica, who was a former IndyCar driver, knows what it's like to be in that car. I think they got a good team there.
Sounds good. Maybe they'll keep that one up in the future. Now, up next on Checkers or Wreckers, NASCAR and IndyCar should pull a doubleheader together at Pocono.
Absolutely, Checkers. I think that Pocono needs some revitalization. I know they get the doubleheader for like 2 back-to-back Cup races there next year, but I think IndyCar and NASCAR in the same venue would just be incredible. I think you get kind of like an exchange between the two series on their fan bases. You get some interesting walks of life and different. It kind of makes more diverse in terms of the fans and getting them to interact with one another and maybe make some new fans for those two series. I think it's a great idea.
All right, up next on the list, number 4. A rumor has surfaced that NASCAR will soon go hybrid. Checkers or wreckers?
I think it's going to depend on how they do it. First of all, if they take away the sound, absolutely wreckers. If it's not going to take away the sound, I mean, the sound's amazing when you get there to a race. So if they keep that, and if they're trying to find ways to cut back costs on like fuel and all that, I think Checkers, but it's really broad to say they're going hybrid because what's the hybrid going to be? What's more percentage of what, such like that. So I think let's pump the brakes a little bit and see how things go for there. For now, I'm probably going to say wreckers just because I don't know anything more.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because for a lot of fans, the sound, the vibration of the track when they come by, that's part of the whole thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, and finally for Checkers or Wreckers, another rumor has surfaced that Honda is going to enter NASCAR.
I'm gonna say Checkers. I like this. I think that Honda they've proven themselves in motorsports. They have IndyCar. They're the only other manufacturer besides Chevrolet in IndyCar. So if they can prove themselves on a big stage such as Indy, I think they can do it in NASCAR as well. I think there's some big teams that could even pick them up. I know that there might be some like Richard Petty Motorsports who could be potentially one of his driver or teams, but for someone to be able to build their own engines with it, Team Penske might be one of those. And as a Ford fan, I'd still be fine with Logano driving the Honda. So, I welcome any change with manufacturers coming in that increases competition between the manufacturers. Toyota, it worked out for them. It took them a long time for them to really get competitive, but they finally got there, and now they're a championship manufacturer. So I think Honda coming in will be a great idea.
One more quick thing before we move on. Having a favorite racer, Logano in your case, you just mentioned it wouldn't matter to you really if he moved to Honda. Is that something that matters to most fans?
Oh, yes. When Kevin Harvick and ROSS Racing, when they switched over from Chevrolet to Ford, I've seen a lot of Harvick fans saying they're done with Harvick. They're going to go somewhere else who's got that bow tie emblem on the car.
Yeah, there's always a case to be made at Ford versus Chevy, right?
You've got your driver fans and you got your manufacturer fans.
It's definitely in the sport. So, but moving on from Charlotte, now we are headed up to the Poconos for race 1 of 2 at Pocono Raceway. All 3 of NASCAR's National Series are going to be on hand this weekend. The Cup race is going to air on FS1 and MRN at 2 p.m. So, Russell, what does the Tricky Triangle bring to the table?
It's going to be interesting because this is one of those races that I think is going to have the biggest impact from this rules package we've seen this year. Now, the mountain half tracks have certainly gotten better racing because of the package. I feel like Pocono is going to play out something similar to what you see. That's kind of like in between the mile and a halves and the super speedways. But I think you're going to see close-packed racing. It's going to be difficult to see passing, though, because the corners are more tighter than they are at a mile and a half. So I'm not sure you're going to see a whole lot of passing. That might not make it as exciting. So I'm hoping that Pocono has a great race because they definitely need better racing. Because over the years, that's not been as exciting as it has been in the past. So I'm hoping that it will change up.
All right. So let's move on to the Rock Block, of course, where we talk about Rockingham Dragway. And as we always mention, there's plenty of stuff going on at Rockingham Dragway from pretty much all year long. However, a much-due off week is this week for Steve Earwood and his crew out there at the Dragway. But let's take a minute and recognize Steve. So Rockingham Dragway owner Steve Earwood is being honored for lifetime contributions to the sport during the 17th annual NHRA Hot Rod Reunion at Beach Bend Raceway. Now, Earwood is credited with putting straight line racing on the media map while serving as NHRA's media relations director in the 70s and early 80s. And he's going to be honored today in formal recognition ceremonies at the National Corvette Museum, which is very cool on its own. So, Earwood is also a member of both the East Coast Drag Racing Hall of Fame and the NHRA Southeast Division Hall of Fame. He's a founding member of the North Carolina Motorsports Association, and he served on the Governor's Motorsports Advisory Council. After directing NHRA's national media program for 11 seasons, Earwood was marketing vice president at the Texas Motorplex and vice president and general manager of Atlanta Dragway before realizing a lifelong dream of track ownership with his 1992 purchase of Rockingham Dragway. And we, of course, are very happy that that happened.
Even though everybody wants the Speedway back, and I'm glad it's coming back, but a lot of that hasn't. There's still a lot going on at Dragway every single year. It's been there for, gosh, I can't even tell you, over 60 years, I think. So probably longer than that. But, the Dragway has been something very special around here, and it definitely deserves more recognition, especially Steve and his crew, that, they've been able to put on amazing shows. I mean, not just Epicenter, and not just, we've had NHRA here, not just the Super Chevy show, but even the smaller events like attract different outside of venues, and something's always going on every single weekend from like February to December-ish. So, I think it's really cool to see that we have something special like that going on here.
Yeah, and again, kudos to Steve and his team for bringing these events weekend after weekend after weekend. And as you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head, Epicenter, Rugged Maniac, things that are a little outside the box when it comes to racing. But then, of course, you have National Series, you have the smaller ones that come here. And I agree with you. Sometimes it seems like Steve, his crew, the Dragway in general, a little underappreciated. So us here in Richmond County, we, of course, appreciate everything that Earwood, his staff have done out at Rockingham Dragway. So, before we end the show, who's winning in Pocono?
I like Chase Elliott in this one because he did pretty well there over the past few years. He's been there. He's had some solid races. But I feel like Truex may have a back-to-back coming up here, and I think this is going to be it.
So
Truex. I'm going to go with him.
All right, well, you heard it here first. Number 19 will be in the winner's circle.
We're gonna hopefully we'll be second and maybe even ahead of him.
Well, there's only one way to go if you're in second, and that is first. But that's going to do it for this edition of Ross Racing. As always, brought to you by Rockingham Dragway and RockinghamDragway.com. That is Russell Parker. I am Matt Harrelson. We'll see you right back here next week on the track for another edition of Ross Racing. Have a great week.